live. I'll write it and we'll do it live. And thing sucks.
This is a tough team right here. I like to know where Lou Holtz is right now.
You got to pump it up, don't you know? Pump it up. You got to pump it up, don't you know? Pump it up. You got to pump it up, don't you know? Pump it up. You got to pump it up, don't you know? Pump it up. You got to pump it up, don't you know? Pump it up. You got to pump it up, don't you know? Pump it up. You got to pump it up, don't you know? Pump it up. You got to pump it up, don't you know? Pump it up. You got to pump it up, don't you know? Pump it up. You got to pump it up, don't you know?
What happens if we win out, Trent? What happens if we win? I'll tell you what happens if we win out.
Playoff bound. That's exactly what will happen.
Going to Indy, going to the playoffs. It's possible. Seems like a long shot with Oregon and Ohio State and.
Well, if you look at ESPN's projection, Michigan's going to be 7-5.
Well, yeah, but ESPN says that, and then Matt, one of our other writers, he put out an article where there's a lot of people thinking Michigan is still potentially a playoff team in the first round, maybe a rematch, playing Oregon in the first round. So it is sort of. Let me ask you this: do you think that the expanded 12-team playoff, that there's more excitement with where college football is now versus where it would have been if it had stayed at 4? Like, I feel like the conversation and the fan bases that are involved, it is far bigger this year in terms of looking at the playoff and what's possible.
Yeah, I think so. I think it gets more, obviously you have more teams in it, which gets more fan bases involved. You have more hope, which is exactly what fans want at this point in time in the year. You're 5 weeks into the season. And even if you have one loss before, if you have one loss, you're like, okay, we're about done. Yeah, we're about done. Now, if you have one loss, you're Michigan, you have one loss. Like the fans, while I know it hasn't looked exactly great, you have optimism that Michigan can somehow find a way to get into the playoff. You even have a chance to lose another game and still get into the playoff, which is exactly what you want.
Trent, did you just say there's optimism in this fan base?
There could be optimism in the fan base. I'll tell you what. If they get by Washington this week, even if it's ugly, they get by Washington on the road. You have a bye week. I think there's more optimism than what you might think there would be at this point in time.
I think, maybe. I think it depends on what it looks like. Like if Michigan goes out and gets the win, and we said this against Minnesota, you say it against teams like Arkansas State, like you'll take the win any way it comes. But if Michigan goes on the road and they beat Washington, and it looks similar to what we saw against Minnesota last weekend, where, it's a tale of two different teams and a tale of two halves. If Michigan comes out and looks solid in the first half, and then the second half, you're scratching your head and Washington's rallying back, and it's another, the Wolverines survived another week. Again, you'll take the win, but I don't know how much more optimism there's going to be surrounding this team. I really think it's critical that they put together, a solid 4 quarters. We've seen it in the comment section, and it's been a part of the conversation now for multiple weeks, where there are times where this team looks legit, where it looks like the defense is back. This is what we're accustomed to, and the running game is working, and Khalil Mullings is a superstar. And then you go into the locker room and you come out, and it's like, where the hell did that team go? It's almost like they were replaced with somebody else. So Michigan's going to have to find a way to figure that out. And I'll say this, I feel like we're going to be doing this every week from here on out. It started with the Texas game. By the way, that Texas game feels like a year ago at this point.
Yeah, that seems like forever ago.
A long time ago. And all during the offseason, it was like week 2, Michigan, Texas. That's going to be the fork in the road. And then that didn't go Michigan's way. And then it became USC. And then Michigan beat USC, but there were question marks, and it didn't really look all that great. And so even USC wasn't really the deciding factor. I just think that, now we're looking at Washington as the first road test, and whether or not that's going to determine what you really have in Michigan. And it just seems like week after week after week, you go into it expecting to get some answers. And by the time you leave, you're like, I don't really know. And that goes back to what we talked about on Monday. Like, how long do you do that before the question marks really are the answers, to where it's like, yes, there are question marks, but those are your answers.
Once they start losing.
Yeah, I suppose maybe
I mean,
that.
if say the same thing happens against Washington, say they're up 21-3 at halftime, end up winning 24-21, but you're right. The second half collapses. It's terrible. It's a huge question mark. It's a concern. But if they win the game, they're 5-1. They're already ranked 10th in the nation. They might get another bump up to 9th. I mean, they just keep winning, and at the end of the day, that is all that matters.
CJ says, don't be that guy. We're not talking about losses here, Trent. This team is 2-0 in conference play, undefeated. Everything is on the table. Big Ten championship is on the table. Playoffs are on the table. Hell, national championship is still on the table. And going back to what I opened it up with, I do think that, I saw on CBS Sports, they were talking about sort of, the 12-team playoff, and they were comparing it to, anybody that watched Georgia, Alabama last weekend, it looked like those teams were head and shoulders above everybody else. But let's not forget that Georgia was in a dogfight with Kentucky, right? So this idea that the expansion, all these other teams that are coming in, they don't belong on the field with the likes of Alabama and Georgia. I would push back on that. And I do think there is more parity in college football now. And all it takes is one Saturday. Your entire body of work is great, but you step on the field with a Kentucky, you step on the field with an Ole Miss that got a loss, and certain things can go a certain way. And before you know it, you do have some excitement in the college football playoffs. So I absolutely love it. I do want to say and remind everybody in the comments section, it is Fan-Led Wednesday. This is your show. You are going to be guiding the show. I haven't really paid attention to too many of the comments coming in as we're going through the intro part here. But if you've got a question, throw it into the comments. If you've got a topic you want us to tackle, football related, Big Ten related, whatever it is you want to discuss for this hour or so that we're going to be live here, this is going to be up to you. Otherwise, Trent and I are just going to sit back and do what we do, talk fashion, talk politics, and that could be a really boring show on a Wednesday afternoon. You guys don't want that. Jacob, you're pretty late. You're about 5 minutes late. Actually, you're about 7 minutes late. So
yeah, I haven't seen any questions yet, Chris.
I haven't seen any of it. Let me get back up to the top here. I saw a meme online. This is from Ricky from the Facebook page. I saw a meme online saying Amon-Ra St. Brown threw a better pass than any Michigan quarterback has all season. That's tough sledding, guys. I mean, is that true? Trent, did you see the touchdown pass on Monday night? Decent pass. I think that's more of just a shot at the current state of Michigan football in the the quarterback situation that's there. Let me ask you this. I mean, I know that the numbers don't look great. And in particular, I can't even believe I was thinking this, but I'm going to say it because, it's Wednesday. We're waiting for people to get in here and ask some questions. But this is a thought that went through my mind. Are you 100% opposed to making a switch back to Davis Warren?
Am I 100% opposed to it?
Is that off the table for you?
I think so. I mean, I obviously I do probably like everybody else. He's more of a polished passer than what Alex Orji is. However, I keep going back to him turning the football over, and while their offense does not look very good, obviously, especially the passing attack. But when you have 6 turnovers in 2.5 games, he kind of has some of the same issues that Alex Orji has right now, where he wouldn't look off of his first progression. In what Alex Orji doesn't do, Davis Warren would try to throw it into double, triple coverage, force things down the field, which would result in turnovers. And unless he could limit that, and I don't know that he can, especially at this point in time of the year, and you obviously don't want to be losing games right now when you have to win them. Now, I guess if Michigan goes and drops to Washington, and then you go and lose the next game to Illinois, then maybe you do look at a quarterback change. But like me personally, I'm rolling with Alex Orji until Michigan starts dropping games.
I think that that's fair. And I think that the reason that I asked it is because I was thinking about this Washington game, and I'm thinking like, shit, if Michigan goes out once again and throws for less than 100 yards, and we see almost a repeat performance of what we saw against Minnesota, where you look good early, the running game is working, then you go into the half, the opponent makes, coaching staff makes adjustments, you come out and you're struggling in the second half, and it's because your bread and butter isn't there. You can't run the ball and you can't move the ball through the air. for as much as I thought it was off the table 2 weeks ago when Michigan announced that they were making the switch to Alex Orji, I'm not so sure that I wouldn't go back to Davis Warren. And yeah, there are some issues there in terms of decision making, and you can't turn the ball over. That's like the number one thing you can't do is turn the ball over. But turnovers are bad. Throwing for 32 yards also isn't great. And so there comes a point in time where I think, if you go into the third week of this thing with Alex Orji and you don't see a little more creativity with him, a little more, I don't know exactly how you do it. Is it designed runs? Is it something to free him up? Is it something to get him into the flow of the game? The bubble screens are great and the short out routes and the crossing routes. Like, okay, we know that that's there, but you've got to find a way to stretch the field. And if you're not doing that with this Michigan offense, then I'm not going to go doomsday on it, but I just don't see a realistic scenario where Michigan gets to where they want to be if you're not.
But did Davis Warren really ever stretch the field? I mean, when he did try to stretch the field, it seemed like he would throw an interception. So, like, while Alex Orji is not even attempting to do it or not completing it, I don't think that Davis Warren's that necessarily that answer either. I mean, if Jack Tuttle's healthy, maybe you give him a go, but I just don't see how the Davis Warren situation is even possible.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a fair point. It's not like they were, when Davis Warren was a starting quarterback, they were dropping back and throwing 30, 40-yard bombs. But it did seem like Davis Warren was having more of an opportunity to throw the deep ball and to at least give it a shot. And it just doesn't seem like they're quite there with Alex Orji. And again, I don't know at what point in time you decide, like, all right, we need to start opening these things up. There very much seems to be this belief in Michigan that they can continue. It is as cliche as it is, man. Like, it very much is a one game at a time, 1 week at a time. This opponent, like last weekend, it was Minnesota. And if they could win doing it a certain way against Minnesota, that's what they were going to do. I think the concern comes in where if it is a Texas situation and you're down 14 early, what does this offense look like? Are you going to be able to hammer your way back into the game with Khalil Mullings in the running attack and short bubble screens? I mean, dude, Samaj Morgan is Michigan's leading receiver. He's got like 12 receptions for 60 yards, but that's through 5 weeks. And a lot of that came against Texas in garbage time when Michigan was forced to have to try to move the ball down the field. And so I think if you see a similar performance from this Michigan passing game against Washington, where it is less than 100 yards, maybe it's 60 yards, maybe it's 70 yards, and Alex Orji is slightly north of 50% through the air. If he's avoiding turnovers, I think that's great, but it also means that Michigan is very much a one-dimensional football team, and you're not really seeing much growth through the passing game. Like, if you look at this offense, where they started week 1 versus where they are week 5, where is the growth in this offense?
The running game, right? That has gotten better. But could you even, is it even possible to say the passing game is as good at the beginning as it feels like it's regressed, right? Am I crazy? I agree. No, I agree, but they're also throwing it less too, which is probably how they feel about Alex Orji as a quarterback. But I know early in the year, Davis Warren was throwing the ball more, but that was also because they got off to those slow starts. Texas got a huge lead where Davis Warren threw the ball, it was almost 30 times, I think, against Texas, which for a Michigan quarterback is unheard of in today's Michigan football. So I feel like if they're running the football, you're not really going to see the quarterback throwing it a whole lot because Michigan doesn't want to do that, and they probably don't necessarily even trust Alex Orji to throw the football, especially downfield.
Yeah, then I think you got to get more creative in the way that Alex Orji is running the ball and how you're utilizing him there, because a lot of what we're seeing from him now, he is rolling out, he's extending plays, he's waiting for something to develop downfield, and it's not developing downfield because, to your point, and you've said this multiple times, Trent, that the Michigan wide receivers are just not getting separation. So every throw that Alex Orji has to make downfield, it's got to be like precise. It's got to be on target. He doesn't have the luxury of dropping back and just putting it in the vicinity because his wide receiver has got a 5-6 foot radius where there's nobody around him. He has to be extremely precise. And when you put a, inexperienced quarterback in that type of situation who does have, thinks he needs to work on throwing the football, like, that's just not a recipe for success. And, there's a lot of heat that's come down on Kirk Campbell and even to a certain extent Sharon Moore in the way that they've chosen to operate this offense. And I think that it's this weird thing between, like, is it working great? No. But is it working well enough to win on Saturdays? Like, so far outside of the Texas game? Yes. And I just don't know that we're seeing enough improvement week to week to where you can look at this team and think like, yeah, this is a legitimate playoff team. Like there just seems to be so much growth offensively. And to Bobby's question from the Facebook page, he says, what's your all's take on the Washington offense versus the Michigan defense? Trent, I think this really just depends on which half it is, but I'll ask you, what do you, we saw Washington take on Rutgers on the road last Friday. Rutgers obviously got the win, but what did you see out of the Washington offense, and how do you think that's going to compare to what Michigan does defensively?
I mean, I kind of look at Washington like a USC. They got Will Rogers. He can throw the ball for a lot of yards.
By the way, did I see Giles Jackson still out there running out?
He's actually their number 2 receiver right now on the team.
Crazy. Giles Jackson, for those that don't know, former Michigan wide receiver, ended up transferring out to Washington, thought it was going to be a good move, and I did get to the national championship, just happened to lose to the Michigan Wolverines, but I saw that on the back of his jersey. I'm like, is that Giles Jackson still playing? It feels like he's been in college for like 8 years.
But yeah, I mean, I view them as a USC team. You know, Miller Moss, Will Rogers. They have a high octane offense. They want to throw for a lot of yards. They also have a good enough running back, Jonah Coleman. He came over with Jed Fish from Arizona. They've got a lot of talent on that offense, and kind of like the USC game, you want to get pressure on Will Rogers. You want to try to make them as one-dimensional as possible. And luckily, it sounds like Josiah Stewart and Will Johnson will be back. We'll be playing on Saturday. You're going to need all of your big-time players, and you need them playing. It's going to be a hostile environment. They're having a purple out for their fans. So it's going to be, it should be very interesting to watch the Michigan defense on Saturday going up against that Washington offense.
If you listen to Keyshawn Bennett, they're not worried about that environment at all. It's a Michigan dub all day long. Yeah. And Washington rotates quarterbacks, right? They've got a true freshman that comes in. He's a little more mobile and can help, make the offense a little more dynamic. I noticed that they utilize him quite a bit in red zone situations. And so I think for Michigan's defense, Bobby, it is going to be a matter of discipline. And if these guys can be locked in and if they can play their brand of football for a full 4 quarters, I love Michigan's defense against the Washington offense. Sounds like Will Johnson is going to be back, like he's healthy enough at least to go. So you're going to have Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant, and it sounds like Josiah Stewart's on his way back. Derek Moore, you're going to have the linebackers there, and then you're going to get Will Johnson back in the secondary. And you've got Jair Hill on the other side, who in the first 2 to 3 weeks looked like he might be a liability. Now it looks like he's really coming into his own. He's grown a lot over the last couple of weeks. I think this Michigan defense can 100% put the Washington offense on ice and keep them from doing what they want to do. The biggest question in that matchup, Bobby, is can the Michigan defense do it for 4 quarters? We know that they're good for doing it for a half. Can they put together a complete game? Because I'll say this, if what happens against Minnesota happens against Washington, and you do that on the road in Seattle, in a purple out in Husky Stadium, where it is going to be, forget what you think about the Washington football team. Those fans are going to show out. Michigan's coming to town. This is like sort of history, right? This is the new Big Ten. Everybody wants to see it, and everybody's going to want to get a W in this game. If Michigan allows the Huskies to crawl back into it, I think they're good enough offensively to do what Minnesota really wasn't able to do, which was steal the game. And they tried.
Definitely.
21 points in the fourth quarter. Like, Washington is capable of doing that, cannot have a repeat performance. So, Bobby, long story short, I like Michigan's defense, assuming they can play 4 quarters. If they put together 4 quarters, this is Michigan's game all night long. But if they have those lapses on defense and they play a good half of football, this thing's going to end up being a lot closer than it needs to be.
Yeah. I mean, you look at that Rutgers game, I think Washington actually had a ton of yards, but they just didn't capitalize it in points. And I don't think the Rutgers defense is better than Michigan's defense. Obviously,
no,
it was at Rutgers, so you have that home field advantage there. But I think the Michigan defense overall is much better than what Rutgers has. And like you said, if they can play 4 quarters of football, you got to think the Michigan defense should come out on top over the Washington offense.
Dude, it just dawned on me. I'm going to be watching this thing on TV at night. I'm going to be sitting with like chicken wings in front of me, maybe some cheese sticks around. I'll have, my wife's going to make something phenomenal. I'll have my son on the couch with me. Like, I'm excited for this one, man. I can't wait to see how this plays out. And then you get the first road game of the season out there in Seattle. This is what it's all about. And for as much as, once again, we hated, conference realignment and expansion and all of this stuff, like, we think about how many incredible matchups we've already had this season, and there's still so much more to come. I think I'm starting to come along to liking the conference realignment. But Mike Rogers from the Facebook page, he asks, why isn't Jaden Warren, who apparently is a quarterback on the roster I've never heard of? I think he means Jaden Davis.
Yeah, he corrected it a little bit later.
Oh, he did. Just busting your balls there, Mike. But he says, why isn't Jaden Davis starting? All these other freshmen are making an impact around college football. If he's not starting, what is it? Next. Wait, what does it mean? If he's not starting, no X, it concerns me for his future.
If he's not starting now, I don't know.
I'm gonna eliminate that last sentence here, and I'm just gonna boil the question down to, why isn't Jaden Davis, the true freshman quarterback, starting? Trent, we have talked about this topic quite a bit. You seem to be
he corrected. He said if he's not better than what we have now, he may never be.
If he's not better than what we have now, he may never be. All right. So 2-part question. Trent, why isn't he starting? And B, do you not think Jaden Davis is better than the options that Michigan has trotted out on the field so far?
Look, I know that there's a lot of, it's probably not even rumors. It's probably actually factual, but it sounds like that Michigan promised that he could have a redshirt year. I'm not fully buying that, because I think that if Jaden Davis was much better than Alex Orji or Davis Warren, Sherrone Moore wants to win. Kurt Campbell wants to win. They see these guys every day in practice. I think if Jaden Davis is head and shoulders better than these guys right now, he's your starting quarterback. But I think the Michigan offense is too flawed just to throw in a true freshman right now. Offensive line's not very good, especially pass protection. That right side, scary. Evan Link has issues just about every week. Your receivers, we already touched on that, but can't create separation. You really don't have that go-to guy. You put this true freshman into the fire right now. To me, if he doesn't succeed right away, you just kill his confidence. And I don't know what that means for his future at Michigan.
I agree. And I also, I want to dive into that just a little bit more, this idea, and obviously we've all seen it floated around. There have been people that have said it in the comments, and maybe it's coming from a message board, maybe it's coming from a guy like, I don't know, Sam Webb or something like that. I don't know where this started, but there does seem to be a belief that the coaching staff made a promise to Jaden Davis's parents that he wouldn't have to start during his freshman season. Trent, is that a thing? Would you ever really make that sort of promise to a borderline 5-star quarterback that you're bringing in, when it looks to me like Michigan does? It's not like they have a solidified QB1 in Ann Arbor. And if Jaden Davis was head and shoulders, to Mike's point, above these guys, to hell with any promise you made, right? If he's clearly the guy that's going to help you win football games, like, you put him out there, right? Or do you honor some sort of weird promise that you made to the parents where you're not going to play this guy? That just seems like, I don't understand, man. It seems like such a weird thing to me, where you do see true freshmen playing and able to make an impact. And if Michigan is struggling at the quarterback position, I don't care what promises you made. If Jaden Davis can play, I'm guessing that he's a competitor. I'm guessing he wants to be on the field. If he can play, you put him on the field if he's your best option. All these promises and development and all this other shit, and even with the struggles on the offensive line, don't you got to play the best guy at the position?
Yeah, it's great to tell parents and players, hey, we would like to redshirt you, but look, we're going to practice you every day. If you are our best option, we're playing you. Like, we want to win. If you give us the best chance to win, then you're going to play. And that should be how it is for every single player.
That's why I find it so hard to believe that commitment was, maybe it was a sort of like, hey, we're going to try to avoid that at all costs. We think we've got Jack Tuttle over here who can get us through for the year, and we think that's going to be the best option. And obviously Jaden Davis, there's some development that needs to take place there. So it's setting up really well.
It's a slow release, kind of a low release. I know they're trying to work on too.
Yeah, kind of like the sidearm sort of thing. And, I could see that sort of conversation taking place. I don't envision any sort of scenario where, if you're Sherrone Moore, or, maybe the previous regime made that promise. I don't know what the deal is, but if the kid's the best option you got and he's head and shoulders above these other guys, like you play him. Like this is college football. This Sharon Moore's job is not really on the line, but I mean, you know, your legacy is on the line. There's a whole hell of a lot of other guys on this roster that are depending on that position to be able to work. And so to me, it's malpractice if you've got this weapon there and you're just saying, well, damn, he would be the best option by far, but we just can't because we made this promise to his parents. Now, screw that. If this guy's the best thing you got, you put him on the field. So that's why I just don't know how much truth there is to that. And I really hope that's not the case, because that would be a bad look for the other guys on the team that want to be successful. If you know you've got this guy there and he's not playing because of a promise you made to his parents.
Yeah, I mean, if he's going in practices and just lighting up the Michigan defense, throwing for just all kinds of yardage and scrimmages, yeah.
You imagine
how could you not play the guy if he gives you the best chance? I mean, I do buy that maybe his parents they do want him to redshirt, and Michigan maybe did promise him. But at the end of the day, I firmly believe that if he gives you the best chance to win, he's your starting quarterback, but he's not. And I think there's a reason for it.
Right. And I don't think it has to do with a promise that was made to his parents. I think it's more so where he's at in his development. And I think it just shows you that there's some growth that needs to take place. And right now, as of today, he is probably not the best quarterback on the roster. Doesn't mean he won't develop into that. But right now, as of today, I think if he was the best and it was clear to everybody in that building that he was the best, I think you'd see him starting. Douglas from the Facebook page, he says, do you think Michigan should use Orji as a Tim Tebow type, really make him a true run threat on every play? I mean, I do think he's a run threat on every single play, but Trent, do you think that there's maybe a different way to use Alex Orji that would help that be more effective?
Well, I don't think Michigan is calling a whole lot of QB run design plays, which to me is malpractice when you have a guy that you don't fully trust throwing the football. You know that he can run the football and you're not using it to your advantage. I know, I think it was Monday, during the radio show with John Jansen, he asked Sharon Moore about that. And Sharon was like, hey, JJ McCarthy could run the ball, but that doesn't necessarily mean you want your starting quarterback running the football. But I think you should. I think a guy like Alex Orji, you should utilize his skill set of running the football when you have Kalel Mullings, you have Donovan Edwards back there. You have potentially three guys that could be running the football on any single play. Until that you get him developed as a passer, utilize what he is good at, which is running the football.
Yeah, I would say that's really the only change that I could see needing to take place is just throw in some more designed runs and you know, scheme up the offense to where that's the goal going in. Like I said, when we were talking about this earlier, it just feels like the vast majority of the time that Alex is running the ball these days is when he's rolling out and he's waiting for somebody to get open downfield. They're not getting open. And so he's pulling the ball, tucking the ball, and he's taking off and running. And he's pretty effective in that role, right? Like he can go 10 yards pretty quick and get you near the first down or get you the first down. But it just doesn't, it seems like they've really gone away from trying to find a way creatively, you know, some designed runs for him to give the defense something else to think about. Now, I will say when I went back and watched the Minnesota game, the other night, you know, there was a little more creativity. You put Donovan Edwards out in the slot, or you put him out wide, and then you bring him in motion. You know, they brought him in from the left, they handed him off the ball, and then he took it back to the left side. And so it seems like there is a little more of an effort to try to get him involved and be more creative offensively. But I mean, damn, dude, it's just like everything, unless it's Kalel Mullings, you know, hauling and dragging people along and just doing what he's been doing. Every other aspect of this Michigan offense seems difficult. Like that really is the only part that works, and it works really good for like a half. It's not really like a complete game necessarily. And I think a big part of that is, I mean, dude, how much better would a guy like Kalel Mullings be if there was also an effective passing attack on what he was doing? I mean, this guy might go from, you know, averaging, I don't know, 120 yards per game. You might see this guy up over 200, but because Michigan doesn't have that, it really neutralizes what I think could be a pretty special rushing attack.
We keep using that 150 mark, but if Alex Orji could throw for 150 yards a game, it would just break open that run game even more.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's funny because the other night we were texting about the wide receiver who's committed to NC State. He's from Florida. He's a 3-star. He came in and watched the Michigan game, the Michigan versus Minnesota game, and it sounds like for some odd reason he's like strongly considering Michigan, which is, you know, you're a kid from Florida, you go sit in the stands in Ann Arbor in the rain, and you watch that game between Michigan and Minnesota, and you're like, I can see myself fitting in here. Like maybe if you're a running back, sure. If you're an offensive lineman, I get it. Even a tight end, but a wide receiver, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how that happens. Why the hell did I even bring that up? What was the point of bringing that up? What were we talking about?
I don't know. That kind of came out on the blue.
Completely lost my train of thought. There was a reason I brought it up. It was going somewhere. And then the train just came off the tracks. Whatever.
You'll think of it in 20 minutes.
I'll think of it at some point. I'm trying to talk. I'm reading comments over here. I'm trying to sound like I know what I'm talking about, and it's just I'm failing. Jeff Knight from the Facebook page. He doesn't even have a question. He's just shouting Tuttle into the ether. Maybe. I mean, if Tuttle was healthy, I would say give him a shot at this point. I'm willing to give anybody a shot on this quarterback. Who the hell is the other guy that's on there? I don't even know how to pronounce his last name.
Denigal?
Well, Jaden Denigle's in this. Somebody asked about Jaden Denigle. I saw it in the comments. Why is Jaden Denigle not an option? I just, the guys that aren't options at this point, I think they're either hurt or they're worse than what Michigan has put out there. I mean, we're trying to I don't think it's a conspiracy. I don't think it gets any deeper than that, right? The other options are either hurt or they're not as good. And Jaden Davis also falls into that category. And so I think that really tells you, a lot about what you need to know about this current quarterback situation.
Yep.
Jacob from the Facebook page, he says you have to stop moving from QB to QB. You're hurting the offense. Let Orji develop in the game like Bama did with Milroe. I do think there's some truth to that. I mean, you don't want to keep switching back and forth, Jacob, but I think that I'll just say this, and this is coming from somebody who thinks pretty highly of Alex Orji and was very, very excited to see him get an opportunity because I thought this offense, the ceiling for this offense, would have been much higher with him behind center. If you watch these last 2 weeks, and I get it, it was raining and there were elements to deal with last weekend, so I don't know if that's necessarily, he did improve from the previous week to last week, and he did it in the elements. But overall, if you watch this passing attack over the last 2 weeks and you don't walk away pretty damn concerned, I don't know what to tell you. And it just doesn't seem sustainable. You do this for, potentially 3 weeks going into Washington. And I think you got to have a very real conversation. It's like that point, it's a pick your poison. Do we go with a Davis Warren who's a little more polished and can possibly put up more yards through the air and free up what we have in the rushing game? Or do we stay the course with Alex Orji and hope that we can just pummel our way, to 9 or 10 wins and maybe squeak into the playoff?
Yeah, I just don't think there's a good enough answer on this Michigan team other than possibly Jack Tuttle. I just don't. I already went in through my spiel about Davis Warren, but I don't know. I just don't think that he's a better option than what Alex Orji really is. You have a turnover issue, or you have a guy that's going to throw the ball 10 times a game. Like either or, I don't know that you're going to win many games doing it.
Yeah. And there also is that Mike from the Facebook page points out that they did bench Jalen Milroe last year before bringing him back in. There was that whole quarterback issue, and we talked about that early in the season, right? Alabama lost to Texas. Jalen Milroe got benched. They ended up bringing him back in. The season turned out the way it did. They beat Georgia. They end up getting into the Rose Bowl to play Michigan, and the rest is history.
Yeah, but we have to quit comparing Jalen Milroe with Alex Orji.
I mean, the compare, Vince Young comparisons and we got to stop doing that shit. Like the expectations are, I think it throws people's expectations out of whack. Like Alex Orji is Alex Orji, and who he is as a quarterback is who he is. And I do think he will get better and continue to grow if he's given the opportunity to do so. But I think that it just seems that there are some limitations with him. And it feels like if offensively Michigan could find a better way to get him into a rhythm, it frees up those other things. Oh, that's why I brought up that quarterback that came to watch Michigan. He's committed to an offense right now that is 93 in the nation in passing yards per game. 93 in the nation. And that seems like, Jesus, that's shitty. Like you are in the bottom quarter of college football if you're 93rd in the nation. 93 in the nation is 200 yards per game is what they average through the air. If Michigan, dude, how much different would this offense be if Michigan was averaging 200 yards through the air? It would be vastly different.
They'd be a top 10 offense.
That's what I'm saying. If you could count on Alex Orji to get you 200 yards through the air, which again, NC State averages 200 yards through the air. That's good for 93rd nationally. So asking for 200 yards through the air is not asking for an elite performance from the passing game. But what that does, if you're getting 200 yards through the air, that's forcing a defense to have to account for some semblance of a competent passing attack where they've got to account for things. And now a guy like Khalil Mullings can do far more damage than what he's able to do now because everybody knows that's what Michigan's leaning on. Everybody knows that's what's coming. And when the defense knows that, even if you're playing in Minnesota or hell, even if you're playing in Arkansas State, at some point in time, usually when they go into the locker room at halftime, they're going to come out, they're going to make adjustments, and they're going to find a way to slow it down and be more effective. And that's what we've seen now for 3 straight weeks. And thank God Khalil Mullings was able to drag his way to that 63-yard run against USC. Otherwise, the conversation that we're having about this is probably quite a bit different.
Oh, absolutely. If it's not for Mullings, Michigan loses that game. And yeah, the conversation is completely different.
They were not going to pass their way 90 yards down the field to get to the end zone. I mean, it did require a superhuman effort from Khalil Mullings, and he delivered, of course. MMB from the YouTube page says Michigan doesn't have any big receivers to go up and get the ball besides the tight ends. Michigan receivers are small and fast, but for some reason can't create space. I think that is a huge issue. And for as much as Alex Orji gets the attention, and that's what comes with the territory of being the quarterback anywhere, but particularly at a premier program like the University of Michigan, there's going to be a lot of attention on you. But Trent, you and I have talked about this a number of times now, and just not just the inability to get separation, but I do think there's something to be said for the type of wide receivers that Michigan has recruited, the Ronnie Bells and the Roman Wilsons, and they found some success with those guys. But right now you have a situation where Michigan does have a lot of small receivers that can't get separation. And outside of a guy like Colston Loveland, and even to an extent Marlon Klein, they don't have that target down the field where you can just toss the ball up and you've got a guy who can go and make a play on it. Who do you think comes closest to being that guy where wide receiver wise, take the tight ends off? If you're Michigan, you got to throw the ball down the field. It's got to be a deep throw, and you got to trust that the guy can make a play on the ball. Out of the wide receivers, who's that guy for you?
Are we talking about receivers that actually play? Because it would be a Morian Walker. The dude's 6'4". He's athletic. He can jump, but he doesn't play. So I guess you can take him out of the equation. Out of the receivers that actually play, it would have to be Frederick Moore. I think he's 6'2", or Kendrick Bell. I guess he's 6'2", 6'3". But I don't know that either of those guys are that guy. Michigan it's kind of head scratching the type of receivers that Michigan recruits, because you don't scheme them open properly. You have all these gadget receivers that are 5'10", 5'11", 6 foot, but you don't scheme them open. And then you're talking about these guys not creating separation. You can't just throw it to them, say, hey, go jump and catch the ball like Nico Collins. You don't have that on this team. And that kind of goes back to how Michigan recruits the position.
Yeah. And it's got to be difficult. I mean, how are you going to get a big body receiver? How are you going to get a guy who can high point the ball? How are you going to get that, kind of like a throwback to like a Braylon Edwards type receiver where it's that guy, it's a 2-step drop and you're tossing it to the back corner of the end zone. The guy's just going to go snag it out of the ball. Like Michigan hasn't had a wide receiver like that for a long time. And when they did have guys like that, like a Nico Collins type guy, they didn't even know how to use him, right? They didn't utilize him the right way in this Michigan offense. And so that goes back to what we were talking about the wide receiver prospect from Florida who came in and watched Michigan and Minnesota. Like, I think Michigan should be recruiting at an elite level for a lot of different positions. If you're an offensive lineman, if you're a running back, hell, if you're a fullback, if you're a tight end, like I can see why Michigan would be very appealing. I have no idea what it is they are pitching and selling to a potential wide receiver to come to Michigan other than, hey, it will change if we get the right pieces in place. But then, if you're a recruit and you have the opportunity to go play, wide receiver at Alabama or Ohio State or Georgia, like, I just don't know if you're Michigan, how you compete with those things. So I do think that that's a very realistic consequence of what we're seeing play out on the field offensively, that at some point in time, as much as, you might like the University of Michigan, the facilities might be great. Playing in the big house is just an incredible thing. Like, people are going to look at the offense and say, yeah, but can I produce in this offense? And if I'm spending 99% of my time blocking downfield and I might get one opportunity for the ball to be thrown my way and it's going to be 5 yards off the mark, I don't want to spend my Saturdays doing that. Like, give me what I saw down in Tuscaloosa. Like, I want to be making those types of plays and playing those types of games as a wide receiver.
Yeah. And Michigan probably won't be recruiting those 5-star, high 4-star receivers until they do develop some kind of a passing game. You're not going to get too many of these guys wanting to come here and block for a living.
What would Jeremiah Smith look like in this Michigan offense? I'm very curious.
How would they even use a Jeremiah Smith or a Ryan Williams from Alabama? How would you use those guys?
I don't know. I wish there were a way that we could figure that out, because I'm just curious. Like, all things the same, nothing different. You just plug Jeremiah Smith into this offense. Can he? I don't know. Are we seeing spectacular plays through the air, or is he pretty much a glorified blocker at this point? I don't know, man. But dude, the idea that certain programs have weapons like that, when I watch that, I'm just like.
And Ohio State's one of those programs that every single year they have one of those guys that you just know that's going to tear it up.
Plug and play. And play. Tyrone from the Facebook page, I'm guessing he's talking about Amarion Walker. Yeah, he does wear the number 1 jersey, and we've talked about that on the show before. I don't know, the wide receiver position, wearing the number 1 jersey, like, that used to mean something at the University of Michigan, and which is weird to me, because Sherrone Moore does seem like a guy who's so enamored with the traditions at Michigan, right? Like, he wanted to wear the Block M hat, and he's got the bust of Bo Schembechler and Jim Harbaugh up in his office, and he's very much a traditionalist at the University of Michigan. I'm just, maybe that's one of those things that, I mean, does it even matter anymore? Does the number 1 jersey really matter at the University of Michigan anymore? I
forget what year it was, but the first year that I remember it just changing, because obviously, yeah, the number 1 jersey, you gave it to your just this out of this world star player, but I remember it was Jim Harbaugh. I want to say it was 2016.
Kakoa Crawford?
Kakoa Crawford. He gave the number 1 jersey to Kakoa Crawford. It's like, what's going on here? Like, this dude must be really good, right?
Yeah.
And we saw what happened there.
I mean, no knock against Kakoa Crawford.
Yeah, no.
He wasn't Anthony Carter, and he wasn't Braylon Edwards for sure. Jacob from the Facebook page, he asks, why aren't we getting 5 running back commits year in and year out? Maybe you mean 5-star running back commits? I understand not getting QBs, but Michigan is a smash mouth football team. How is Bama, LSU, Ohio State, and Georgia beating us out for top running backs? I mean, look, that's basically what we just talked about is, well, there is there is certainly a part of that, because if it was strictly based on style of play, dude, if you're a center, maybe not a center with the way they're swapping them out, but I mean, if you're a guard, if you're a tackle, if you are a tight end, if you are a running back, and Michigan offers you, I feel like that's got to be a very compelling offer for you, because you know that you're going to get production in the Michigan offense. I mean, if you're a tight end and you go play at Bama, like, are you going to be as involved as Cole Loveland is involved in the Michigan offense? Probably not. So, yeah, I think Trent's little gesture there, and for anybody who's going to be listening after the live, and it boils down to money, and I think that that's a whole nother topic of conversation in terms of NIL and the way that Michigan utilizes it. We know that they are not willing to pay players out of the recruiting trail or out of the transfer portal. Michigan's whole deal is that once you get here, there will be opportunities for you to make money, but they're not going to make any financial promises up front. And look, for as much as I have pushed back on that and sort of taken issue with that, we have seen the consequence of teams that do that. UNLV being one of those teams who just lost their starting quarterback after after a really good start. Now, I don't know. It seems like
I don't know that it matters.
I'm going to say it sounds like the back quarterback's doing just fine. But the reason that he decided to pull out, what they were 4-0 on the season, And starting quarterback who transferred in said, you know what, I'm done playing. I'm going to redshirt for the rest of the year, and then I'm going to transfer once the season is over. He did that because there were promises made to him, financial promises that once he got there were not delivered on. So there is a flip side to, now do I think that would happen at the University of Michigan? No, because you got people like a Dave Portnoy and you've got big donors who can come through and really get the dollars where they need to be. But ultimately, Michigan has really dug in the ground on this, and they are not interested in paying guys off the trail or out of the portal. And I don't know, man. I think unless like a third party, like a Dave Portnoy wants to get involved and, pay $3 million to get an elite guy here, I don't think that should be something that Michigan is pitching to recruits or transfer portal guys.
Yeah, I think Michigan should get every 5-star running back there is, just based on the style of play. If you're an elite running back, you come to Michigan, you're going to run the ball 20 times a game. But when you mix in the NIL with it, Ohio State, Oregon, Georgia, Alabama, these guys are getting so much more when you go down there compared to Michigan. And that's the difference.
That is the difference. Let's see. I'm at 12:30, so I'm about 22 minutes behind on the comments. I honestly, man, I think we've gotten to like 5 questions. 5 questions or comments here. Bobby from the Facebook page, he's got another question here. He says, do you guys think our rushing attack will have a lot of success this week? They can get more creative with running plays. Seems like they would practice a lot more formations to run, misdirections, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, I do think Michigan's going to have some success with the rushing attack this week, but I think it goes back to what we talked about earlier is, are you going to have a passing game, a competent passing game to complement that? And I think when you don't have that, you see a lot of Michigan, especially in the elements, should have been able to continue to hammer the ball away and find success with Khalil Mullings. But the reason why they weren't able to do it in the second half, the reason why that looked so much different is Minnesota went into the locker room. They looked at what Michigan was doing. They came out, they made adjustments defensively, and Michigan struggled because there was no other option other than to keep doing what they were doing offensively. And so at some point, Bobby, I think Michigan has to prove that there is another gear to this offense, that there is a part A and a part B. And when you are one-dimensional, any defense in this league at Division I football, if they've got a coaching staff worth their salt, they're going to make meaningful adjustments and they're going to be able to slow it down. Trent, do you buy into that yeah, Michigan will have some success, but it really just depends on what can they do through the passing game against Washington on the road?
Yeah, Washington has the 51st ranked run defense, allowing almost 122 yards a game. But Washington is going to be like Minnesota and USC, where you're going to stack the box. If Michigan pulls off a big run, hats off to them. But Washington's going to have the same type of play defensively that these other teams have, where you're going to stack the box and make Michigan beat you through the air. Now, Michigan's gotten off to a big start in the first half the last couple of weeks, where luckily they had that cushion where it didn't come back to bite them in the win-loss column. But it's going to be a different environment. You're on the road. It's going to be a hostile environment. And Michigan, they're going to have to do something through the air, I think, in order to win the game. I don't know that Alex Georgia has to throw for 200 yards, but I think if you can get to 130, 150, I think you're probably looking at a decent Michigan victory.
Yeah, 2-score win, I think, at least on the road. And then you walk out of Husky Stadium with some confidence. You put 150 yards and, Alex Orji is, 60% through the air. Maybe you get a touchdown or two out of the passing attack. And then I'm really curious to see what that does for Khalil Mullings in the rushing attack, because I feel like they could be far more effective. And that's how you get 4 quarters of a good performance, because it's balanced now and you can do a little bit of everything. And Eric, to your point, like, I agree. I think it's too early to give up on Alex Orji, and I know that Trent is in the same boat. I don't think anybody necessarily wants to give up on Alex Orji. I think what I'm saying in particular is that if they don't find a better way to utilize him and play to his strengths and find a way to allow him to get the ball down the field and develop some, not just some confidence, but some chemistry with his wide receivers, these guys have to know that they can go out and execute. And I agree, winning ugly is still winning, but there's no question there's going to come a point in time where you're going to be in the same situation that you were against Texas, where you're down early. The defense has figured you out in terms of the rushing attack, and they're shutting it down. And you're going to have to look to number 10, and you're going to have to look to guys like Samaj Morgan and Tyler Morris and Kendrick Bell and Frederick Moore, and you're going to need something from them. You're going to have it. It's not just going to be like hey, it's a third or fourth quarter thing. We're going to try something down the field. There's going to come a point in time where you need it. Those guys have to make a play. And so the sooner you can develop that chemistry and that confidence in that group, the better off everybody's going to be. In particular, a guy like Khalil Mullings, who is a very good running back. And this at least the offensive line from a rushing standpoint, they seem to be figuring it out, and that is starting to work. We talked about it before. You add a competent passing game on top of what Michigan's already doing from a rushing standpoint, and I think the whole tone of what the conversation is surrounding this program changes. Now you start to look at Michigan as like, okay, they can move the ball through the air. They're really good on the ground, and the defense plays 4 quarters of solid defense. Now all of a sudden, like, Indy maybe feels a little more realistic. Playoffs feels a little more realistic. But until they get that figured out, Eric, I think there's going to be a big question mark, and it is going to come back to bite this team. They are going to be in a situation where they have to pass it. And if they don't have it, if they can't look at Alex Orji and that group of wide receivers, and that group can't move them down the field, this team's going to be in big trouble down the stretch.
After the Minnesota game, I don't know if you saw it or not, but Bruce Feldman from Fox. By the way, Bruce Feldman said that he thought USC was going to crush Michigan. After the Minnesota game, he said if this Michigan team could be somewhat competent through the air, the way that they can run the ball and play defense, he said, you're looking at Michigan being right back in the national championship picture, not just the playoff, but the national championship picture. If they can just throw the ball through the air, they can get to 150 yards through the air. The whole tone of this team is drastically different.
Yeah. And again, it's, 150, 200 yards through the air. That's not elite through the air. That gets you to about, I don't know, right around the 100th nationally mark. You're still in the bottom half of the Big Ten, but Michigan is so good, I think, in the rushing game and, and what they do in other areas that I don't know, man.
Yeah. In today's college football, if you don't throw it for 250, like it's not considered good anymore passing the football. And when you're Michigan, you can't throw it over 100 yards. You're basically a service academy at this point in time.
They are a service. They're down with Air Force and Navy in terms of there's only 4 teams in the country that have a worse passing offense. And I think, look, when it comes to rushing offense, Michigan, it's not like they're top 5. They're not top 10. They're not top 15. They're not top 20. Michigan is somewhere in the 30s in terms of their rushing attack. That would be 34th nationally in rushing yards per game. I think 34th turns into a top 10 rushing attack if you're getting 150 or 200 yards from your passing game, which puts you at about 90th in the nation. So if Michigan could get to that point, I think the offense, the rushing attack would be far more effective. And that's what we're talking about, is like, that really is the difference between a team that's going to go 7-5 or 8-4, or a team that has a chance to go 9-3 or 10-2 and be in the playoff discussion. And it seems like a strange place to be for this Michigan football program, that you can't even get average production out of your quarterback. I think that's what I find most concerning. Is it a scheme thing? Sure. Is it a personnel thing? Yeah, it's a combination of a lot of things, but ultimately the end result, when you look in the stat sheet, hell, when you sit back and watch them on Saturday, I don't watch any other team on Saturday where they drop back to pass. It feels like it's just a struggle to get anything explosive, anything productive through the air. If it ain't a bubble screen or a quick slant or something to that effect, Michigan really isn't finding any success with it. And I just find that to be extremely puzzling.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know, man. It just seems like they can do, especially the coaching staff, you can do more to try to give Alex Orji some sort of rhythm, confidence through the air. I don't know. Another Hoopy.
What do you want? What do you want us to do, Matt? If I sit up here and talk about all the things I love about Michigan, somebody's going to shit on me for being too optimistic. I do think that is the positivity in this whole thing. Is like, Michigan is sitting here going into week 6, They are 4-1 on the season. They are 2-0 in the conference. And it really is the matter of like, I feel like I do this every podcast, like a little bit more through the air. If you can do that, I feel like everything changes. So it's not like,
I don't even think we're asking for much more. Like 150 yards, like that's nothing.
Right. That 150 yards, by the way, you're still like worse than 100th nationally. Like you're still near the bottom of all of college football. And I think that's where I draw the positivity from is like, 2 or 3 weeks ago, or especially following that loss against Texas, everybody thought this team was so far away. The offensive line wasn't good. Donovan Edwards wasn't doing this, and like they couldn't pass and they couldn't do it. We're at a point right now where things are starting to get figured out. Defensively, we have seen some dominance. They just need to do it through 4 quarters. In terms of the rushing game, the offensive line looks better. We now have a solidified RB1 in Khalil Mullings, and we know we're getting out of there. If they can just get a little bit through the air, this team can still legitimately be a conference championship contender. It can still make a lot of noise in the college football playoff. And so I do feel upbeat about that. I feel encouraged. The only question is whether or not the coaching staff is going to get this thing figured out and find a way to go from 129th nationally to 100th nationally. If you can make that kind of improvement in this Michigan offense through the air, that'll be the difference between watching the playoffs at home and potentially hosting a game in Ann Arbor.
Yeah, I agree. And again, we're talking about if you don't throw for 250, then you're not even considered really a good passing offense now. So 150, I mean, take that for what it's worth, but I don't think that 150 is asking for a whole lot, for especially from the Michigan Wolverines. I think they should easily be able to throw for 150 yards a game.
Well, Rico, we talked about that. I think it was on Monday. You spend all afternoon watching Michigan, Minnesota, and then you come home and you flip on Alabama, Georgia, and it just looks like it almost doesn't even look like the same sport. It's like you're playing football on another planet, and some of the plays that they're making through the air. And I mean, dude, if you could get just one of those plays to happen on a Saturday in Ann Arbor, you would feel completely different about it. But yeah, inept is pretty strong. I just think it's a different brand of football. And I think ground and pound can work. I'm all, sign me up. I'm on board with it. But I'm not going to sign up for ground and pound when you're doing it because you have nothing through the air. Like, to me, you're latching on to ground and pound. It's like, I'm not going to use it.
It's old school styled football right now, and that's what Michigan's playing. But it's a new era of football. Like, is it sustainable? They are 4-1. They are winning games doing it. It just feels like they've got to do something through the air. Because I don't think it is sustainable throughout the whole 2024 schedule.
It's not. And I was going to use an analogy that would have definitely gotten me canceled. So see, look at there. I do exercise good judgment here and there. Let's see. Rico from the Facebook page again. He says, here's the upbeat. We might be able to become the 90th best passing offense in the country. I'll say this, Rico. If they do become the 90th best passing offense in the country, this is a playoff team. If they become the 90th ranked passing offense. Can you look that up? Can you see what that equates to? What is the 90th ranked passing offense in college football? What are they doing through the air right now? Well, I can tell you that. What did you say NC State was? 94th. Okay, so 93rd. 90th is UCLA at 205 per game. Michigan is currently 130th at 115. So Michigan would have to average what, like 250 a game here on out to get to that level? Not happening. Okay, but not overall. But do you think moving forward, if you just start the slate clean, starting at Washington for the next 7 regular season games, is it too much of an ask for this Michigan offense to average 200 yards through the air? Yeah, I'm not even confident they can get to 150, which is what my magic number is. If Michigan can get to 150. Why does it have to be this way? There is nothing that you've seen from this Michigan offense to make you even think they could get to 200, right? There's people out there that are like, listen to these assholes. They just want they want this and they want that. It's like we're asking for the 90th best passing offense in the country, and that doesn't feel like that's just not going to happen. No way. Michigan finishes within the top 90 teams by season's end, I will be I will be shocked. And let's be fair to Davis Warren. The reason why Michigan is as high as they are right now is because he was putting up more yards through the air. Like, if it looked the last 2 weeks, if it had been that way through the first 5 weeks combined, you're probably looking at the worst passing offense in the country.
Chris, J.J. McCarthy last year averaged 199.4. The last time Michigan's had a quarterback to throw for over average 200 yards a game was 2019. Shea Patterson for 235.5.
Does Shea Patterson have any eligibility left?
Tell you what, I know that he got slammed by a lot of Michigan fans, but wouldn't you love to have Shea Patterson right now?
I bet Matt Kirby would like to have Cade McNamara back. Would you take Cade McNamara back? Would you make the trade right now? Would you trade Davis Warren and Alex Orji for Cade McNamara straight up right now? Would you do it?
I plead the fifth.
You can't. You can't do that. Would you make that trade? Let's say this were the NFL. You know what?
Okay, hold on.
We're probably getting close to that, right? Where we can start to make in-season trades here. Would you trade Alex Orji?
Cade McNamara through 4 games is averaging 147 through the air. He has 3 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. I think I'm sticking with what I have.
What happens if we went out, huh?
And he's playing behind a better offensive line than what Michigan has right now.
Yeah. And Scott, am I saying Kurt Campbell as an offensive coordinator is bad? I think it's too early to tell. First of all, I don't think he's bad. Is he doing as good of a job as he can? I'm not sure. And it's because I just don't know. Are the pieces he's trying to work with that bad to where the offense has to be so watered down and so simplified and so vanilla that you can't really add more to it? I mean, if his hands are tied and the personnel is that bad, then I don't know how much of that is on Kurt Campbell. But if the personnel is being held back because of the type of game that's being called and the way Michigan's running their offense, then yeah, I think that does say a lot about Kurt. So I really think it's just a matter of, what do you think is more true? Do you think it's more Kurt Campbell, basically tying the offense's hands behind their back and not letting them do what they can do? Or do you think the personnel, the guys on the field are just not all that great and Kurt Campbell is doing the best he can with what he has? I mean, Trent, what do you think is probably more true?
Well, I mean, no offense to these Michigan players, but I don't think he has an all-star cast to work around. He doesn't have a Roman Wilson or a Cornelius Johnson even to work with here. With that being said, he is a first-year play caller at a D1 level. That was my concern entering the season. I didn't know if he would be able to scheme things up for this Michigan team where you really need an elite play caller, somebody that can design the plays for the caliber of players that Michigan has at receiver right now. I would guess if Michigan has like a Kalen DeBoer running plays here, Michigan probably looks a lot better through the air than what it does now. And that's all I'll say on that.
Fair. I mean, you're not going to get a lot of pushback unless it's from like the super fans out there. But in terms of the Cade McNamara trade, I think that's what Tyrone's talking about. He says right now, and then the next 3 MMB from YouTube says, nope, selling that. Douglas says no. And then Douglas doubling up from the YouTube and the Facebook page. He is 100% against making that trade. Yeah, we're getting down to the end here. MMB says it's also Campbell's first year as an offensive coordinator. I guess let's cut him some slack. Look, I think I think this is probably a good place to leave it, because for as much as everybody thinks it should just be a reload situation, and this is Michigan, and Michigan won the national championship, and Michigan has been on this 3-year run, and yada, 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 there has to be a sense of understanding what really took place this offseason. And even though we were optimistic and you looked at a Will Johnson and a Kenneth Grant and a Mason Graham and what Michigan was doing defensively, and what we thought Donovan Edwards was going to be offensively, and how some of these pieces were going to work, I think we're just seeing the reality of what happens when you lose not just so much on the roster, but you lose the heartbeat of the football program, which was Jim Harbaugh, which was strength and conditioning coach Ben Herbert. Like they lost a lot of key pieces to what made Michigan so special. And that's not a knock on the guys that are still here, because Sharon Moore was a big part of that. Even Kurt Campbell was a part of that last year. Like, these guys were a part of that. And I think they made the moves they made because they thought they would keep as much of that together as they possibly could. But it couldn't have been easy for Sharon Moore. You know, people talk about we should have gotten a quarterback out of the transfer portal. By the time Michigan got done playing football, and by the time J.J. McCarthy made a decision and Jim Harbaugh made a decision, there really weren't any. Right. It was too late. There weren't transfer portal guys that were there. And we talk about Jack Tuttle all the time. You probably thought you were going to have a healthy Jack Tuttle. And if he could be a game manager for you, that Michigan would be fine offensively. But Jack Tuttle cannot get healthy. So now you're left with Davis Warren and Alex Orji. You give Davis Warren a shot, who's probably a Jack Tuttle light type player, and you give him an opportunity, and he goes out and he throws, how many interceptions was it in 3 weeks?
6.
6 interceptions in 3 weeks. So if you're Sharon Moore, you just can't continue down that path. And so I think to MMB's point, like, yeah, it's Kurt Campbell's first year as an OC. It's Sharon Moore's first year as head coach. And these guys are trying to figure out a way to keep this thing going in the wake of so many losses. And I think that, I said it on Monday, as we sit here today, Michigan is 4-1 on the season. They are 2-0 in conference play. It has not looked great. And the bright side, Matt Kirby, if you're still in here, is that Michigan is 4-1, 2-0 in conference play without it looking great. Imagine what it looks like when it does look good, when they can put those things together. And what they got to do is find a way to just be okay through the air. They got to find a way to be average. If you can put up 90th ranked stats, if you can be 150, 200 yards through the air, passing game gets better, time of possession gets better, defense gets better, I think you start to see a more complete Michigan team. And if you see a more complete Michigan team, you know, these guys can go back to Indy. They can do it for a 4th straight time. You can walk into Columbus and you can get a W, but my goodness, man, like you have to find a way to find some sort of rhythm through the air, and you can't keep putting it off. There's not going to be a better time to do it. Right? You got to go on the road to do it against Washington. And then you got to go play Illinois, who's having a pretty damn good season. And then you got to do it at home against Michigan State. And then you got Oregon. Then you got, you know, it's not, you got to go on the road to Bloomington and face undefeated Indiana, who some people think Kurt Signetti is like the next Nick Saban, which is an insane thing that we're hearing. But point being, there is no perfect time now. You are in conference play. This is the deal. And if you're going to keep putting it off week after week after week, at some point it's going to bite you. Might as well open this thing up and figure out what you can do through the air, because Khalil Mullings needs it. The wide receivers need it. The Michigan offense, the Michigan defense needs it. Everything potentially for this team, where they can go and what they can do, really is just reliant on getting a little bit more through the air. And I think that's where I'll end this thing. I mean, Trent, do you agree that really is the difference between 7-5, maybe 8-4 if you're lucky, versus 9-3, 10-2 playoff type team? Is that, 75 extra yards through the air, 80 extra yards through the air? Is that the difference between success and failure for this Michigan football team?
100%. If we're talking about Alex Orji as the starting quarterback, and he's been very safe with the football. Granted, he threw an interception last weekend. We can debate that all day long, but he's been mostly very, very safe with the football, making good decisions, not forcing it into double, triple coverage like Davis Warren did early in the season. If he can continue to do that, the coaching staff schemes some things open with the receivers. You average 150 a game, which I would argue is below average. But if you can do that,
it's 100% below average. That puts you at like 110th in the country.
Yeah. So if he can do that, 150 a game, you're going to open up the run game even more. The Michigan defense, while there's still some lapses there in the secondary, it's gotten better and better every week. Yeah, I think this team, instead of going possibly 8-4, you're looking at a 10-2 season, which gets you into the playoff. I fully believe that if Michigan gets 10-2, they can go 10-2. You are in the playoff for a 4th straight season, and that is just throwing for 150 yards a game and then being safe with the football.
What happens if we went out, huh?
That is the difference. And Matt Kirby, that is your ray of sunshine for today. The Michigan Wolverines are literally 50 to 60 more passing yards every Saturday away from being a playoff team. And hopefully we'll get to see that a little bit on Saturday against the Washington Huskies. I'm excited for it, but before we get to Saturday, we'll be back Friday talking game predictions, how we think it's going to play out. And then Saturday, we got a little bit of a treat for you. I think we're going to be going live post-game to talk about what we see in Seattle, so I'm excited for that. But we'll be back on Friday, noon Friday, pregame, all that fun stuff. We'll see you on Saturday post-game. It's going to be a loaded weekend. Appreciate y'all.